Hello guys, Mrs. Rainierson here for chapter 7 and 8 of The War That Saved My Life. Let's get into it. Chapter 7. Susan caught her breath. Jamie made a sound halfway between a sob and a scream. I was sure I'd heard Stephen wrong. Billy White was the same age as Jamie. Billy White couldn't be dead. Stephen said, "The Nazis bombed London 57 straight nights." I knew that. I'd been in London for the first night of it. Ma'am's factory had been hit the next week. Stephen said, "They're all gone." Jamie said, "Not Billy." "Gone where?" I asked stupidly before I realized what he meant. Oh, Stephen, not all of them. Stephen's little brother and 3 little sisters had all been evacuated, same as Jamie and Stephen and me. But when there weren't any bombs at the start of the war, lots of parents, including Stephen's, took their evacuated children back home. Stephen only stayed because the colonel had become so frail he needed Stephen's help. "All except my dad," Stephen said. "He was at work. If only I'd—" "You don't know that," Susan said quickly. "War is terrible." Tears streaked down Jamie's face and Susan's. I could feel them starting to roll down mine. Stephen didn't cry. He looked like he might never cry again. "Dad and me, we're going to stick close now," he said. "Pay the Germans back, we will." I couldn't picture Stephen's father. I knew he worked at the docks. Where we grew up, nearly all the men did. "Anyhow," Stephen said, "I brought you something. I found it in the wreckage of your house. I had to look around after you left, but before the bulldozers came." The airfield near our old home had used the rubble from our home to fill bomb blast in their runways. I knew that. Now Stephen reached into his bag. "It isn't much." I didn't expect much. We'd rummaged through the wreckage ourselves the day after the bombing and not found anything worth saving beyond a few pots and pans. "It's this." Stephen set a battered metal frame in front of Susan. Susan gasped. She grabbed the frame. She threw her arms around Stephen. It was Susan's photograph of her friend Becky, the one that had stood on her bedside table. The glass in the frame was broken, but the photograph was fine. Stephen said, "I thought it might be important." Susan used her handkerchief to wipe her eyes. "I couldn't replace it," she said. He nodded. "I know. I wish I had a photograph of my family." I didn't have a photograph of Ma'am, or Jamie, or myself, or my father. Ma'am's flat had been hit the night Jamie and I were in it. We barely escaped. We hadn't had photographs anyhow. No one did. Not on our lane. "Have some tea," Susan said to Stephen very gently. "I can't stay," Stephen said. "The vicar is expecting me. I only came back to the village in the first place to fetch the things I'd left here. I'm leaving tomorrow. Early train." "Visit when you can," Susan said. "You're always welcome here. Send us your address. We'll write." "I don't think they get much mail on ships," Stephen said. "They do," Susan said. "We'll write you. We're so sorry." Stephen stood. At the doorway he turned. "I'm glad your operation worked, Ada," he said. "You're walking grand." "Our ma'am died too," I said. A cloud passed over his face. "I didn't know that," he said. "I suppose I'm sorry." "I'll say I'm sorry." I nodded. "I say I'm sorry too." "All right then." The door closed and he was gone. Ooh. Chapter 8. Thornton House stood in front of the stables, square and grand like a palace. I never went there. I never even walked around to the front door. Now I fidgeted in the stable yard, staring at the house's empty windows. Why isn't Maggie home? "Another day or two," Fred said. "She'll be here before Christmas." You'd think I'd learn patience in the hospital, but I hadn't. I wanted Maggie and galloping and sunshine and summer, and all I had was cold rain and miserable footing to ride in. Sounds like Illinois in the winter. I wore a pair of Maggie's cast-off paddock boots to do the morning chores, and by the time I got back to the cottage, they were soaked through. Susan fussed at me. She fussed about everything. The cottage was furnished, but it wasn't well equipped, and we needed scads of things we'd never be able to buy. The stores were mostly empty because of the war. Susan said, "I don't know what we'll eat for Christmas dinner. The butcher wasn't expecting us back." You had to register your ration cards with specific shops in order to buy ration food, and of course that took some time. Meat was rationed, so was bacon, butter, cooking fat, tea. Jam, sweets, everything you'd actually want to eat. Fortunately, Jamie and I grew up hungry enough that we weren't too picky. Jamie said, "No goose?" So maybe Jamie was picky. Living with Susan spoiled him. I wasn't. We'd had roast goose last Christmas, my first goose and my first real Christmas. We'd invited 3 pilots from the airfield to share our dinner. They were all dead now. Dead pilots, dead ma'am, dead colonel, dead Stefan's family. I counted them on my fingers. 10 people. They took up every finger I had. I could hardly breathe. "I'll make lunch," I said. "Jamie, get up. There's still dishes left from breakfast. Go wash them." Jamie was rolling with Bovril on the rug. "Get busy." "Jamie's fine," Susan said. "The dishes can wait." I poked Jamie. "Get to work now." Ooh. That girl. Went to the kitchen. "What do we need from town? I'll go get it." Susan raised her eyebrows. "Not in this rain, not now. We can make do. I want to be useful. Sit and work on some fractions for me. That's useful." I don't know how that's useful. I guess for learning. I can see that. Never mind. I'd never been to school. I'd hoped to go after my surgery, but the village school was closed because most of the village children got evacuated north during the Battle of Britain. Susan was teaching me at home, same as always. Fractions made me feel stupid. When the bottom number got bigger, the real number got smaller, which was the opposite of how I thought it should be. 5 was larger than 3, but 1/3 was larger than 1/5. Then Susan expected me to add them. 1/5 plus 1/3, even though 5 had nothing to do with 3. I'm sure you guys have all thought that. Same thing. I know I did when I was little. I looked out the window at the rain. Susan set a weak cup of tea in front of me. Tea was rationed strictly enough that we could never brew it as strongly as I'd like. "Take your time," Susan said. "Draw it out." She taught me how to draw pictures for fractions. Half a pie, 1/3 of a pie, 1/5 of a pie. Things haven't changed. Pizzas. Pie. Drawings were like a different kind of map. "Too many dragons," I said. I stabbed my pencil against the paper. The point snapped. "Yes," Susan said. She handed me her penknife to resharpen the pencil. Ooh, a penknife. Good thing we don't have those nowadays. Ooh. I can only imagine a whole class full of kids with penknives sharpening their pencils. "Math dragons are the worst." "I thought you loved math." She studied it at university at a place called Oxford. "I do, but its dragons are fierce." Suddenly, the front door flung open. Red, maybe she's in trouble. Maybe Stephen White's back. Who knows? Maggie swooped into the room. "Ada," she yelled. "Happy Christmas! I'm finally home!" "Maggie!" I jumped up and threw my arms around her. "Finally!" She laughed. "Finally! Look at you! Look at you! No crutches!" "Shoes," I said. "Does it hurt?" "Hardly at all. You want to see?" "Please." I stripped my foot bare, and stood on it. My ankle could bend almost half an inch now, more than ever. Maggie ran her fingers over my scar. "That's amazing," she said. "Tell me everything." I laughed. "There's so much." Susan brought in 3 more mugs of bad tea. "You'll stay for lunch, Maggie?" Maggie pulled a face. "Can't," she said. "I promised Mom I'd go shopping. The housekeeper has a cold, so Mom said we'd do it. But I've got excellent news. We want you all to come to Christmas dinner at our house. Father's home for almost a week, and Jonathan's got 4 days starting tomorrow." "Then it will be a family party," Susan said, "and we shouldn't interfere." "No, please interfere," Maggie said. "The last thing we want is just family. We want to have fun. And Ada, guess what? On Boxing Day, we're going to host a paper chase. Jonathan wrote and said so." What's a paper chase? Like paper airplanes? Let's find out. Maybe she'll talk more about it. Boxing Day was the day after Christmas. I didn't know what a paper chase was. "Like a fox hunt," Maggie explained, "only without foxes or hunting or hounds. It'll be brilliant. You'll see." I'm still not following. Suddenly, Maggie's eyes went wide as though I'd frightened her. "What?" I asked. She touched the black cloth on my sleeve. "Your armband." Oh, I touched it too, and for a moment our fingertips met. Susan made it for me. She'd made us all armbands like the one Stephen wore out of an extra piece of blackout material she'd found in the scullery. Jamie had asked her for one, and then I did too. They're a symbol of mourning, I said. Mourning spelled with a U, not morning like early in the day. You wear one when you're sad because someone died. Maggie nodded. I know. I'm so sorry about your mother. I should have said that first thing. It's not for Ma'am, Jamie said. It's for Billy White. It's for Ma'am, too, I said quickly. It wasn't really. I hadn't even known about armbands when Ma'am died, but I didn't want Maggie to think of me as uncaring. What sort of girl didn't mourn her own mother? Maggie said, Who's Billy White? I only know Stephen. We explained. That's awful, Maggie said. That's worse than awful. And the colonel, I added. And the dead pilots, though I no longer remembered their names. My mother wrote me about the colonel, Maggie said. She didn't say anything about Stephen's family. Maggie shook her head. I think she thinks that if she doesn't tell me about sad things, I won't find out about them, and then I won't be sad. Maggie sighed. In the middle of a war. It didn't make much sense. Perhaps Lady Thornton just forgot. She was the sort of person who might forget important things. Bovril stalked into the room. Jamie scooped him up. I made Bovril an armband, Jamie said, scratching behind the cat's ears. He chewed it. Sounds like someone else I know. Cats don't mourn, I said. Jamie cut his eyes at me. They feel very sad, he said. They just don't like armbands. I don't know about that, but maybe sometimes the little boy gets sad. Who knows? Maggie stayed for half an hour. At the end of her visit, she looked around the room and said, This place is so gloomy. How do you stand it? Even without the blackouts up, it's like living in a cave. It is a cave, Jamie said. It's our cave. We moved here because it's drier than inside a tree. Swiss Family Robinson, I murmured. Yes, but didn't the Swiss Family Robinson have carpets or curtains or pictures or anything? Susan said she'll make curtains as soon as she can, I said. Jamie added. Her sewing machine died in the bombing. Maggie nodded. That's right. I suppose your rugs and curtains died too. Everything was dying, but I wasn't going to say it. Maggie knew we were fighting a war. I walked Maggie back to the Thornton house. The rain had stopped, the sky was dark, and the wind blew hard. I don't know what to think about your mother, Maggie said. I know you were afraid of her. I know she was awful. I turned my collar up against the cold. Susan had found a winter coat for me at another jumble sale, but it was already a bit too small. Susan was already trying to let it out. Don't say you're happy she died, I said to Maggie. I don't want to hear that. Of course not, Maggie looked shocked. But don't you have any family left? Grandparents, aunts, or uncles? I shrugged. I didn't think so. So I suppose Susan's your mother now. I said no, she's our legal guardian. The papers had come. I had them in my box. Is that better than a mother? Maggie asked. Of course. I hugged Maggie goodbye at the stables, gave Butter a pat, and headed home along the sodden path. I was nearly back to the cottage when I heard Jamie scream. What is going to happen? Maybe another mouse. Maybe a rat this time, cockroaches, or maybe something maybe a little more scary. You'll have to find out in the next video. Bye, guys.